All righty, I'm showing almost 9:30, so we'll go ahead and get started. Good morning, everyone. My name's Jason Vandiver. I'm an Energy Code Program Manager for SPEAR. Most of you folks on here know me. Uh, Unfortunately, probably for most of you, but fortunately, you're going to get to know Mr. John Sedin this morning. He worked with Engineered HVAC. I caught his ACCA low load manual presentation at the ACCA conference a few weeks ago here in San Antonio. And not only is he a good presenter, he really knows the material, sits on the committees. I think you're really going to get a lot out of this morning. With Texas being on the 2015 Energy Code and our envelopes and fenestration, and we're having more and more homes that have low loads, and this ACCA low load manual is a great piece to go with JSD&T to get these homes, to get these systems sized, installed, and operating correctly. I think you'll get a lot out of this morning. Also, in conjunction with SECO, and I will, you will get a course evaluation with this. Anybody that needs ICCCUs, you can answer the questionnaire and you can get ICCCUs for this. And also there will be a flyer. I will be doing 10 in-person HVAC trainings, largely for residential, geared towards residential installers. We'll do a little bit of JS&D, but a whole lot of flex duct, friction rate, equipment location, kind of cover everything. It'll be 2-hour trainings. We'll be doing them at supply houses across Texas. Free breakfast if you register, so that's always good. So those of you that don't know SPEAR, well, if I can get my slide to move. There we go. SPEAR is one of 6 regional energy efficiency organizations. We serve Texas and Oklahoma. Largely, I focus on energy codes, but we have other folks that do city leadership, best practices. We do a variety of things. You will also receive a little bit of information about that in your questionnaire in case you're interested. A flyer for the HVAC training. Sign up if you want those. And then also just to let you know, on April 9th in Austin, we're having our annual conference, the Clean Energy Exchange. You can just Google that and get the agenda, or I'll send a link to that in the registration. There will be a discount code for those of you on the webinar today. So if any of you are interested in our conference, we'd be happy to have you in Austin. And then here's my contact information. Again, this will be on the evaluation. And so you'll have that after the presentation as well. And along with the PDF of the slides, I believe we've already got those, I think. And so with that, one other thing, John is a Michigan man, roots for state and Michigan, he said. I'm a Texas Tech grad, so we'll be hopefully having a conversation about daughter-in-law's, son-in-law's pig farm over a beer when Tech beats Michigan this weekend. So I'm looking forward to that. And with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to John and let him introduce himself and get started. Yeah, if you'll just move down there and click the share your screen button, John, and we'll see yours.
Oh. I knew that.
Sometimes that taskbar moves to the top. Sometimes it's on the bottom. Just move your cursor and that toolbar will come up and just click share. There it is. All right, we can see your screen. Just swap over to your PowerPoints and away we go. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Jason. I'm not sure who's going to win, but I basically root for Michigan or Michigan State against whoever they're playing, unless they're playing each other, and then it's a toss-up. And it depends on the year. So, as Jason said, this is a presentation I did in early March for ACCA in San Antonio, and it coincided with ACCA's release of Manual LLH, which is HVAC design for low-load homes, and something we've been working on for a couple of years because we knew it had been needed for a long time. There is some marketing stuff in here a little bit for contractors because that's who the audience was at the time. So That's why it's what you need to know about low load homes to bid them and win them. As Jason said, I'm in Michigan. We have pretty good code enforcement here. And so basically we're under the 2015 code as well. So today I'm going to tell you a little bit of who I am, why ACCA wrote the manual, what it is and what it isn't, review some marketing thoughts, give you an overview of what's in the manual, and then try and answer any questions you have. The disclaimer is this presentation is an overview of the contents of Manual LLH and has some marketing topics that many of you may already know, but sometimes we forget, so it's a helpful reminder. And it's not intended to be a design presentation, so we aren't going to try and do actual designs today for sure. I've been in the business for 41 years. I bought the company in 1994 that I worked for and been an owner for 24 years, and I just passed it on to my son, who's a PE and is now the owner of the company. I served as chairman of ACCA in 2010. I chair technical services committee, as well as I sit on the codes committee and the QA committee. As you can see, I've been part of most every ACCA manual and standard there is, as well as I sit on the joint ASHRAE ACCA 183 standard, which is for commercial heat gain and heat loss in commercial buildings. I've been very active on the code side of it. I belong to the Mechanical Inspectors Association of Michigan since 1988. I've sat on their board and I do a lot of training with them. I currently serve on the ICC Plumbing, Mechanical, Fuel Gas, and Swimming Pool Council. So I'll be at the hearings at the end of April in Albuquerque. And I sat on the 2009 and 2012 Mechanical Code Technical Committee through those code cycles, as well as the 2012 code cycle for IAPMO and the Uniform Mechanical Code. Our company started out doing HUD homes in the late 70s and the 80s. From there, we moved on to doing more multi-family type work, elderly retirement communities, some extended care facilities, apartment housing around college campuses. We did a lot of development for the Marriott when they were promoting their like extended care or extended stay type motels. So I've worked in most every state east of the Mississippi and west of the Mississippi, I guess Colorado, and I think Missouri's over there as well. So I have worked in a lot of states and under a lot of codes. And we've known for years that low load homes is a problem because we're doing apartments. And of course, apartments has always been a low load issue because most of them only have one exposure. So this is something that's kind of near and dear to my heart and kind of recognizes a problem that we've had for a long, long time. So why did ACCA create the manual? Actually, the industry said it was needed. RightSoft in particular, we had people starting to come to us saying, hey, we're getting these 2,000, 2,500 square foot homes that only need a ton or a ton and a half of cooling. And our programs don't deal with that really well because of the airflow issues and the associated duct design with that, as well as equipment selection. Because that brings up, when you have a low load home, it brings up some real equipment issues. We're finding that the new building codes make many new homes low load homes, which is kind of what I said. We're also finding that the impacts of oversizing is worse than ever. And that's largely due because a lot of people don't believe their manual J-calcs are right. So they just do what they did before. I consulted recently on a 115 unit apartment project that had 78 2-bedroom units in it. Historically, they put 50,000 furnaces in them. They were kind of the through the wall combination unit. And this winter, they have 78 units that have a problem because they were so oversized that the run times were so low that they developed water issues in the heat exchangers and the draft inducers. And now they're probably going to go back and switch out 78 300-pound through the wall units for smaller ones to deal with that. And we've also seen some other cases with 90% furnaces as well that have been an issue. And we're seeing more and more people doing the job twice now because they don't believe what's going on. Those that do size it right encounter air delivery issues and they don't know how to handle it. We'll talk about that a little more. And there's a lack of small equipment offerings that satisfy design needs, CFM capability, latent capacity, those kind of things. Those of us that have been in the apartment market, we've known that for years. But things were more forgiving then than they are now, so you could get away with oversizing, and you can't do that so much. We also find that there's more need for supplemental dehumidification. The ratio of latent load to sensible load is higher in low load homes. So what happens is, say in a 2,000 square foot home, the latent load pretty much stays the same, and it's the sensible that drops. So the problem is when you go to look for equipment selection, while the equipment now will handle the sensible load, it won't handle the latent load, which never used to be a problem before. But as we go to smaller equipment, because of that difference in ratio, it creates some conflict, especially in the southern market. And after all, it's what ACCA does for contractors. We try to write manuals for contractors so they can do the job right. So what is Manual LLH and what it isn't? It's really based on today's homes. And we started out for those homes that conform to the requirements of 2015 and now greater in the IRC. A typical Energy Star home built 4 years ago in Michigan had a HERS score in the low 60s, and that was an Energy Star home. And in the 2015 code in my market, they wanted a HERS score of 52 to 54, which that's a big departure from that. And the 2018 IRC is looking for scores typically in the low 60s, and that happened through that period in the code cycle that everybody said 2015 is hard to comply with, and so they raised it up into the low 60s if you're doing that type of scoring for the home to make it a little more usable. So what in fact this has done now is made Energy Star homes also obsolete, because the requirements in the 2015 code and the 2018 code are more stringent than it was for Energy Star homes. So now EPA is trying to decide what they're going to do with that program. The manual's not aimed at helping a designer build a high efficiency home or design a high efficiency HVAC system or a net zero home or anything in between. It's basically an application manual that augments existing design guidance to deal with the unique low load home challenges related to equipment, low latent capabilities, low airflows. You're going to have room mixing problems, increased home ventilation in some cases, and higher than normal latent loads. It doesn't promote any specific design criteria over another. You're going to hear some manufacturers, like for high velocity systems and mini split systems, think that they're going to win the HVAC market with their product. We don't promote that. We know that there's a number of different ways that you can accomplish a low load home and get it to work properly. It does detail a number of solutions that practitioners can employ when their manual J calculations indicate a low load home. So just some marketing thoughts about Manual LLH for contractors, and we probably know a lot of these when we're doing marketing and we go in and do in-home sales. And of course, one of the key ones has always been set yourself apart. You want to not be like everybody else in the flock. You want people to come to you, and so you want to set yourself apart. So when you're there, it's always good to use things like our technicians are NATE certified and tell them why it's important to them. Many times it's important to us, and NATE's doesn't have a lot of visibility out in the marketplace, so you may have to explain it to them. It's the same way with our company's an ACCA quality assured accredited contractor, and hear why that's important to you. I'm a big believer in QA. I'm on the steering committee. We're a QA contractor, and we get a lot of work from that because not everybody in our market is, and a number of entities now require you to be a QA contractor to do their work. And as part of that, we can say, hey, everybody says they do it, but we actually do it, provide written documentation to prove it. We do a lot of work. We do a lot of big apartment projects, and we do a startup on every one of them, and we leave that document with the equipment. So we can actually prove that we do it, and if we have to go back to address an issue, we can pull out that document for that piece of equipment and knew exactly how it operated on that day. And as everybody says, and some studies have shown, it's really easy for anybody to take a 95% AFU furnace, for example, and turn it into a 70% AFU system by installing them properly. So that's kind of a big deal, and I think it's important contractors make a bigger point of that when they're selling to customers. Be the expert in your market. This book's available on Amazon, but the way to be the expert in your market is to be competent in Manual J or buy Manual LLH and be competent in it. Promote it on your website, promote it on your Facebook page, so that you can go to people and say, hey, I know this stuff. Hey, maybe you walk in with a book in your hand and say, this is what I need to know to do the HVAC system in your home. So it's really important, and it's really good promotion for you to be the expert in your market. And having the manuals and knowing them is one way to do it. And then, of course, you always want to do a quality job at a fair price. And as a mentor of mine, Jim Isaac from Isaac Heating in New York, always said, do a quality job at a fair price and the money will come. And of course, this picture always reminded me when I looked at it that obviously this contractor did a good job, probably at a fair price. We know he did a good job because he put a nice looking thermostat on the wall, and most importantly, it's level. And so it must be a quality job. But as we all know, just like with cars, it's under the hood what counts, not the polish on the outside. So we don't want to say things that make you look like everyone else or actually mean nothing. As we all know, or a lot of us know in today's market, to say we do quality work is kind of meaningless because everybody says it and nobody says they don't do quality work. So it really doesn't set yourself apart. And of course, it never looks good when we say, oh, hey, yep, we do that too. So, and I'm sure you have some other favorites. One of the big things is, I think you don't want to get caught up in making it more than it is. We deal with a lot of things in HVAC, and we all like to think we know them all and we're really smart about it. So when we talk to customers sometimes, even some that kind of know what's going on, we overdo it a little bit and trying to show them how smart we are, and we make it more difficult than what it is, because what we do really isn't rocket science. It's really not that complicated. It's 80% common sense and 20% knowledge, is as often said, but don't overcomplicate it because it's really not. So what's in Manual LLH and why is it important? You know, why should I buy it and why do I need it? You can see on the cover, basically it promotes the fact that we're a believer that you need Manual RS to pick your system, what kind of system you're going to install in the home. You need to do a Manual J. You need to do a Manual S, a Manual D, a Manual T for distribution, Manual ZR if you're going to do zoning. And if you got like an indoor pool or an indoor hot tub in a house type thing, then SPS comes into mind. So basically, LLH gives you the information you need to know to utilize the rest of these manuals in order to design a low-load home. So we knew that when we wrote the manual that everybody pushes you to design or to write a manual that encompasses everything. It's everything to everybody. That's kind of why Manual J went from a 200-page document when it was J7 to a 650-page document in J8. And we didn't want to do that because we already have those manuals, and we didn't want to pick parts out of all the existing manuals and yet make another manual. It typically takes ACCA 4 years to write a manual if it's going to be an ANSI standard. And LLH, because we narrowed the scope of what we were going to cover, we were able to do it in 2 years, which is still a long time. So we knew up front we were going to have to write a preface that said what was the basis. So in the manual, and one of the first pages, it tells you this manual basically is a typical home, could be in anybody's market. We said it's a single-story, 2,000 square foot, 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom home, slab on grade with an attached garage, meets the requirements of 2018 IECC and IRC, and it has an encapsulated attic and upgraded floor insulation. It's exactly kind of the scenario we were hearing from RightSoft and other people that do Manual J's saying, hey, we're doing a Manual J based on the current code, and we've got these issues. We need some help. The introduction kind of defines what a low-load home is. Basically, you're talking 1,500 square foot per ton. Kind of the rule of thumb if you were going to go by that. And of course, rule of thumb is always a good measure to go by, just to see, hey, am I in the realm of reality? So when somebody comes up with this, doing a Manual J doesn't say, well, I'm not 500 square foot per ton, so I must have done something wrong. So being a low-load home doesn't necessarily mean it's energy efficient in today's market. Indeed, many condominiums and apartments, which I've been talking about, that have only 1 and 2 exposures have always been low-load homes and have low heating and cooling loads. But 20 years ago or so, when we did Manual J7, you know, it could have been 600 to 1,000 square foot per ton. 10 years ago, as the homes improved, it went to 800 to 1,200 square foot per ton. And currently, we're often seeing homes in the 1,000 to 1,400 square foot per ton, and up to 2,000 square foot per ton, depending on what the people decided to do with their home that's above and beyond the requirements in the code. For those of us in the heating market, especially for like me in Michigan, you know, we probably care more about heating than cooling. So a low-load home might be a 5 BTU per hour per square foot home in Florida and Homestead, up to 15 BTUs per square foot in Duluth, Minnesota. So Manual LLH is actually an application manual and not a design manual that you're probably used to. It deals with the unique HVAC design issues of low-load homes, identifies some equipment options and approaches that are available in today's market, augments the instructions provided in existing manual, and it's not intended to be a standalone document. So you just can't buy Manual LLH and not have to buy JD&S, because it will not work that way. So everybody says, you know, kind of what's the big deal? Well, the big deal is airflow. So this is basically a system shown in Manual D, and it shows a furnace blower with 1,000 CFM and a 36,000 BTU heating load and a 24,000 BTU cooling load. So this is a home from either Middle America to Southern America, possibly. And so basically, they selected in this example 1,000 CFM blower. Well, a typical home requires a half to 1 CFM per square foot of floor area in order to provide adequate air circulation for comfort, heating, and cooling. So if you've never not looked at that, anytime you design a home, look at the CFM per square foot. So typically in a 2,000 square foot home, depending on the design of it, and where it's located in the United States, it would require from a half CFM per square foot, which would be 1,000 CFMs, up to 1 square foot, which could be up to 2,000 CFM of airflow in a 2,000 square foot home. So the problem comes in is if we take this same home and it's 2,000 square foot, and let's say it only has a 1-ton load, now we only have 400 CFM of air to try and provide adequate air circulation in a home, and it won't work. You will never get the air circulation in a home to provide comfort, heating, and cooling with that kind of CFM. So when we depart from this typical requirement, then we start having problems. The half CFM probably is a more northern market. The 1 CFM is probably a more southern market because, of course, cooling requires more airflow than heating does. But that's where the big problem comes in. And the first real big problem, once we've done a manual J, then we do equipment selection, and then we figure out, oh my, we have an airflow issue, and how are we going to deal with that? So Manual LLH is broken up into 3 parts. The first part talks about the design issues and the procedures. It's all about what is a low load home, if you're going to use zoning, what you have to be aware of. It covers manual J calculations and how to know if it's a low load home, and issues with selecting heating and cooling equipment. Talks about moisture extraction equipment. That was a big issue when we titled that section because nobody wanted it to be just dehumidification, as well as it talks about outdoor air and its impact on the system, supply air, exhaust fans, and controls that may be different for a low load home than you'd find in a regular home. So part 2 is the example solutions, and basically there's 6 examples. 5 of them are examples that people are using today effectively, and one of them, which is example 4, is something that is a play on a zoning system called capacity deployment system that hasn't been proven out in the market yet, but has received a lot of attention and a lot of discussion. So we knew that being as though that this is today's problem, and it's a today's issue, and there's not very many good solutions, these were the ones that we came up that could be utilized if you ran into this type of home. And then lastly, part 3 is the appendices. It gives you more information about the moisture loads for type A climate homes, which would be Charleston, South Carolina, or Homestead, Florida, places that have typically real high moisture loads, the southern Gulf shores and where have you. It goes into more detail on HRV and ERV effectiveness, because a lot of times we'll select a HRV or an ERV based on airflow and not look at the effectiveness of it. And the effectiveness has a big impact, has more of an impact than the airflow does, because you may need to pick a different one based on the fact that it's not as effective as a different kind. It talks more about ancillary dehumidification for low load homes and how to select the right dehumidifier and how to utilize it. And of course, one of the big ones is manual decalculations for using nozzles. And the reason that that is that because of the low airflows, the typical 10 by 4s and 10 by 6 ceiling diffusers that we're used to using do not function well down at the 50 and less CFMs. So you're going to have to use something different if you're going to use conventional equipments. And basically, there is manufacturers now offering nozzles to be used with split system air conditioning other than just small duct high velocity systems. Then it talks a little bit more about energy efficient home design and how Manual LLH applies to some of that. So here again, we're going to go over the example solutions. You just have to understand in the example solutions, these are low load homes, and it's based on using equipment and technology that's available today. There's going to be differences based on geographic and regional locations, just because that's the way it is. We aren't all the same, and that's always a problem when we write a manual, because the person on the committee from Florida wants to write it for Florida, the person from Minnesota wants to write it for Minnesota. Everybody has to understand that there's a lot of diverse geographical differences in America, and so it's got to apply to everybody, including some of those states that have microclimates, and it even gets to be a little more interesting. For a dwelling located in a humid climate. One of the things that we kind of neglect when we do a design is that when we design a home, it's based on an average and not a peak. So we're always going to have temperature excursions, some pressure excursions inside the home, as well as humidity excursions. And we want to limit the humidity excursions the most, because that's what gives us our mold and mildew issues. So the first example we have is a small duct high velocity equipment. Probably a lot of you are used to seeing it. This one was based on possibly installation in Homestead, Florida, or someplace in a highly humid area. It uses nozzles, as they always have, to obtain adequate room air mixing. And of course, if you put in small duct high velocity equipment, you want to install it according to manufacturer's installation instructions. And based on the location and the sizing of it, even with small duct high velocity systems, you can see that an ERV was added in here to handle the outdoor air load, because it's typically so humid. So basically, an ERV would help us deal with the disparity in the ratio of sensible to latent. If we have a real high latent, and the small duct heat pump we pick can't handle all of the latent, so putting an ERV in there to handle some of the outdoor air will help with that, as well as adding a dehumidifier. And of course, there's a number of different ways of adding a dehumidifier. This one basically is a standalone unit and is takes air from some of the rooms and dumps it in near the return. You could put it right into the ductwork if you desired. So there's a number of different ways that you could do this system. So second example, people are actually doing this. It's not the best way to do it, but some people have found that because there's a bigger variety of equipment sizes and ductless mini splits, we're seeing people take an area like in a hallway. You'd never want to take a room, but we've seen applications where people have done this, where they put the head in a room, and then you put a cabinet blower in, and basically you're putting the conditioned air into this plenum, let's call it, and then you're sucking it back up through the return air, which has a outdoor air intake, because we know the current codes. You could have a 1-ton system that's putting 400 CFM of air in here, but because it's mixing it with the outdoor air and the return air in the space, you could put the 800 or 1000 CFM cabinet blower here and then use conventional air distribution if you so desired. And of course, depending on location, you may have to add a dehumidifier or an ERV or an HRV. So the solution may not be compatible with non-compact home designs, and you can get large temperature departures, obviously, because of the way you're distributing the air here. So this one is got its place, but it's not a solution in all applications. So those of you that have done schools or hospitals or some commercial work, you're all familiar with a fan-powered mixing box. Basically, we're showing here that we have a heating and cooling air handler, and it may be putting out 400 CFM per se. And then it has a second fan-powered mixing box that sucks in additional return air or indoor air and mixes it with the other air and then distributes it out to the rest of the home. This doesn't necessarily have to be one blower going into another blower. This system could be actually an air handler with a duct system, and then you come off at different points in the duct system to a fan-powered mixing box, which is what you would normally see in a commercial application like a school or a hospital type thing. And we know that this type of system, does work. Whole house dehumidifier or heat recovery equipment may be required as well. One quick note about an ERV and HRV. There is a difference between the two. One handles moisture better than the other. They're definitely not interchangeable, and Manual LLH covers that in a little more detail, and that's good reading because we often see ERVs and HRVs misapplied. The capacity deployment system basically is what is shown here is basically a 3-zone system. If you have a home that has really good diversity, you can break it up into zones because, as we all know, that each zone is going to peak at different times of the day. So for this system, in a capacity deployment system, what we do is, if this were a 1-ton system and we had the requirement, we could break this up into 3 1-ton zones, and we only let one zone at a time be a caller. And there's no modulating of the other systems. So you could have up to a 1-ton load at a time. So this would work in like my home for sure, because my whole west wall is glass and it faces west. And so 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the whole load of the home is pretty much right there in the living room area on the west side of the house. But the best design is no more than 3 zones, and no zone being smaller than 25% of the full load. Nobody has actually proven this in the field, but theoretically and mathematically, this should work, and maybe an application that you could utilize as long as you have good diversity in the home. Engineered bypass air. This would be a play on a mixing box. The difference is you're paralleling 2 blowers. So you could have, if the first one is 400 CFM for your air handler system and you only needed another 400, you would have a bypass air handler that would bring in outdoor air, or the other one could be. You just have a second air handler that you'd put in parallel and then basically wire them together to the distribution system to do that. The advantage to this is you would only need 2 blowers, where in the mixing box system, maybe you could get by with 2 blowers, but if you were to take off and use smaller mixing boxes, then you might have to have 5 or 6 mixing boxes along with the air handler. With this one, you would just have the 2 blowers. And then, of course, you know, you could need additional dehumidification or heat recovery equipment. And a big note, which they cover in here with this bypass system, is if you're going to use 2 blowers in parallel, the static pressures must be equal to the design pressure drop of the entire duct system. And if you're going to use modulating blowers in there, then they both either need to be staged or modulated in the opposite direction. And the manual goes into great detail over that. And then probably what most of us are looking at, and probably will be the most prevalent system used, is using standard equipment with nozzles. So Manual LLH will tell you how to use or adapt Manual D towards the different pressures and pressure drops that we'd have in this type of system, as well as it goes into detail about picking supply air nozzles and sizing them correctly per Manual D. And it uses conventional return air ducts, but it's going to have specialized nozzles. And there is a number of manufacturers that do make these now. They are available. Some of them are pretty snazzy looking, and we're starting to use these as well because a lot of the developers in the upscale market we're in like the look of them. And if you Google it, you'll find a number of different manufacturers. We've settled on one that we use a lot. We're happy with it, and our customers like it. And so this is more the direction we're headed in. So as time goes on, in order to deal with the low airflow issues, we think that this example will probably be the most utilized, next to probably small duct high velocity systems, possibly. But now that this manual is out and it shows you how to use nozzles on a conventional system, we think this probably will take up more of the market and be more accepted. One of the reasons this works now is that more upscale equipment from manufacturers can handle higher static pressures. You know, some residential equipment where we're used to only being able to handle 0.5 inches of static can handle up to 0.8 or a whole 1 inch of static. So not every furnace will work with this system, or air handler will work with the system. You need to pick one that'll have higher static ability. We also met with AHRI a month or so ago with a number of the major manufacturers, and they recognize that this is an issue with their equipment, regardless of who the manufacturer is, Carrier, Goodman, Amana, Ream. They were all there. They understand this is an issue, and they're all working on smaller size equipment options with stronger blowers. So in the next couple of years, we're pretty confident that we're going to see more equipment offerings come out of the major manufacturers that we typically use to deal with the airflow issues, the difference between the latent and the sensible. They know they're going to have to start making that equipment a little bit differently and have more offerings with stronger blowers. But that's not available today. So this is something that you can buy the manual and you can utilize today if you run into a low load home that has low airflow issue. The manual is currently available, and we did release it the first of this month. You can find it on the ACCA bookstore. and they are available to be shipped today. So with that, I guess I'll turn it back over to Jason for any questions, and we'll go from there.
All right. Thanks so much, John. Good information, and I learned something more the second time through. I still have a long way to go. Do have just a few questions that have come in thus far. The first one is, in your opinion, what is a good threshold to determine if I need to use the air distribution processes in LLH? For example, if I have a 3,000 square foot home in Houston and install a 2-ton heat pump, that is about 700 CFM over 3,000 square feet, or 1 CFM per 4 square feet. That seems too low. In the old days, I would have installed a 4-ton heat pump, and at 1,400 CFM. That's about 1 CFM per 2 square feet. So what is a reasonable threshold to use these special air distribution strategies? 1 CFM per 3, more or less? What's your opinion on that?
Well, the threshold, the bottom threshold, which I covered, was a 0.5 CFM per square foot is the minimum amount of airflow needed to adequately move air around a home. In some homes that got a lot of rooms and what have you, it could be as much as 1 CFM. So if you're below a 0.5 CFM per square foot, then you're into a low load home, because you will at that definitely not move enough air to adequately heat and cool a space. So on a 2,000 square foot house, that would be 1,000 CFM. If you're under 1,000 CFM, you're going to have problems.
Okay. And then I've never installed a high velocity nozzle system. Do they typically have noise or other issues? It seems like they'd be preferable to the homeowner on an aesthetic basis. What kind of premium are you looking at for the equipment, and are they noisy?
Well, as I've found working over half of the United States, what I pay up here and what you pay down there is two greatly different things. So it's hard to know because everybody's market's different. And I've worked in a number of states, and even here in Michigan, what I would price a project up north is different than I would in Detroit, because that's the way the market is. Typically, the small duct high velocity systems have gained their space in retrofit applications, especially historic ones where there's limited area for ductwork, because their units are typically small hideaway kind of things. You're talking 2, 3, 4 inch at the most size ducts with nozzles. You buy the nozzles from them, you buy the duct from them, and all the equipment from them. Most of it's acoustically lined. It's been around for a long time. So you would just have to go to who your supplier would be that would handle that, bid it both ways to give you a better idea. The installation is a little bit different, but typically noise is not an issue. It's all about the application, sizing it correctly, locating the nozzles appropriately so that you get circulation of air and not stratification in the rooms. So they're a good system, and they're in a lot of use in a lot of markets, but you'll have to, quote one out yourself, and then you'll know.
From the looks of them, it looks like for some of these high-end homes, the aesthetics of them would be preferable to your typical registers.
Well, we find that in the market today, people like the nice, clean look, the square lines. We're into the dark colors, gray and white. Interiors, to me, are more austere. They're a little colder. We see a lot of more like the white marble floor kind of look, or tile look, and gray cabinets and that look. And so the smaller round diffusers, I mean, they come in a different, you can get them in about any color. You can get them in stainless steel, you can get them in chrome, red, black. You can get them in different looks. The people like it. the same people who make these, they now make terminations for the outside of the home. And we have a lot of projects going to that type of termination because they like the look. So I'd have to say it's modern, it's contemporary, and today's market likes it.
Yeah, it seems to be the way it's headed. And then the last question, for a home in Houston, what would you generally find more valuable? A whole house dehumidifier, VRF system, ECM / high SEER equipment, or an ERV? I'm assuming he's talking about removing moisture, or just, I guess, in general, in a humid climate, whole house dehumidifiers, variable refrigerant flow, ECM high SEER, or ERV, or all of the above, or just general thoughts on that.
Well, it's what I really like about what I do, and what I like about HVAC is because it's not like being an electrician or a plumber. It's like when you go into a home for those guys, it's all kind of the same old, same old. For an HVAC contractor, it's different every day. And you can do two identical homes and put in two different HVAC systems. You know, there's more than one way to skin the cat, as they say, I guess. And so you have to go in, and whether it's Houston or Grand Rapids, Michigan, or San Francisco, California, basically you have to look at the application and what's going on in the house, you know, and what the customer wants, and how they utilize the home. I mean, like apartments where people aren't there all day long, that's one system. But then again, if you have somebody that's home all day long and they do a lot of cooking and a lot of laundry because, you know, they got 6 kids, you know, then it's a little different situation. But that's what I like about it, is there's more than one way to do it. That's why you want to learn all the different ways to do it and be the go-to guy in your market, as I talked about earlier. Is you need to know about all of those things in great detail, so when you go to the house, you can pick what's right for those people that live there. And that's what I say. That's what I love about this industry.
That's really good advice. I think too often, you know, we get stuck in the rut of this piece of equipment, this type of distribution. You know, we don't want to. We know this manufacturer, we know this process, and differentiating yourself in the market by offering that multitude of solutions. I think that's just really sound business advice, and you know, it allows you to charge a premium, especially some of these higher end homes that we have going in some of these markets. I think that's excellent advice.
I think the biggest problem, to add on to that a lot of contractors have, is they marry themselves to one distributor or one supplier, and basically they only install what they can buy from that one supplier. And you really got to broaden your horizons, and you need to buy from whoever offers the equipment that you need. I mean, that was the big argument when we rewrote Manual S, is, you know, we'd get people that say, but they only make a 40,000 furnace. And it's like, well, yeah, but you only got a 15,000 BTU load. So putting a 40,000 furnace in for the sake of saying, well, that's the smallest that manufacturer makes, that doesn't cut it in today's market anymore. You have to find the equipment to fit the application and not try to force the equipment on an application.
Yeah, good point. And that's what, here in a couple of weeks, and I'll send a link out with the evaluation and everything else I'll send. We have RightSoft senior trainer Alex Meany, and he's going to get into that in a little more detail, just how crucial the equipment selection process is. You know, after you get a real accurate load, I mean, that's, and I'm no expert on any of this. That's why I bring experts such as you on, and I really appreciate all the information you gave us this morning, John. It's really good information. Our contractors need it. We ended up with 135 participants on the webinar, so we got it to a lot of people this morning. And once again, thanks so much. And I hope it's you buying the beer next time I see you. Go Red Raiders.
Super duper. Look forward to it.
All right. Thanks, John. We'll talk to you later. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. And you'll get all that information by email either late today or tomorrow. Y'all have a great day.